In 1986, the face of rock and roll was wearing lipstick. If you turned on the radio or flipped on MTV, you didn't see danger anymore. You saw spandex, you saw hairspray, you saw bands playing songs about girls, fast cars, and parties on the Sunset Strip. Rock and roll had become safe. It was a commodity. But in the underground, something darker was building. A sound that didn't care about your hair or your clothes. A sound that was ugly, fast, and violent. While the rest of the world was partying, 4 kids from the Bay Area were in a garage, writing a funeral dirge for the American dream. Their names were James, Lars, Kirk, and Cliff. They were Metallica. And 40 years ago, they released an album that didn't just change the rules, it burned the rule book to ashes. To understand Master of Puppets, you have to understand the hunger. They weren't rock stars yet. They were the Alcoholica kids, acne-scarred, denim-clad misfits who drank cheap vodka and slept on floors. They had just released Ride the Lightning, a record that proved they could play faster than anyone on Earth. But speed wasn't enough anymore. They didn't want to just be the fastest band in the world. They wanted to be the best band in the world. They looked at the pop charts, at the glam metal bands selling millions of records with power ballads, and they made a choice. They weren't going to join them. They were going to destroy them. They were about to write 8 songs that would force the entire music industry to bow down to the heavy metal underground. The creation of the album didn't happen in a luxury studio in Los Angeles. It happened in the freezing cold of Copenhagen, Denmark. They flew to Sweet Silence Studios in the fall of 1985 to work with producer Flemming Rasmussen. By the time they finished in late December, it was pitch black by 3 p.m. The wind howled outside, and inside, the atmosphere was surgical. This is where the myth of sloppy thrash metal died. James Hetfield wasn't just jamming, he was engineering. He was obsessed with the crunch. He would record the same rhythm guitar part 4, 5, 6 times, layering them on top of each other with mathematical precision until the sound wasn't just a guitar anymore, it was a tank engine. But the soul of the record didn't come from the guitars, it came from the bass. Cliff Burton. He was the anomaly. He wore bell-bottoms when everyone else wore tight jeans. He listened to Bach and Beethoven when everyone else listened to Iron Maiden. Cliff treated the bass guitar like a lead instrument. He didn't just follow the root notes, he painted with them. If you listen to the demo tapes from this era, you hear it. You hear a band that is pushing their own limits, struggling to play the complex riffs they had written. They were punching above their weight class, sweating over every single note, desperate to capture the sound they heard in their heads before the money ran out. They were living on cheap beer and Danish sandwiches, completely unaware that they were recording the Sgt. Pepper's of heavy metal. When the album finally dropped on March 3, 1986, the silence from the radio was deafening. They received 0 airplay. They released no music videos. The mainstream media ignored it. But the kids didn't. The album spread like a virus, hand to hand, cassette to cassette. And when you pressed play, the first thing you heard wasn't a party anthem. It was an acoustic guitar intro that sounded like a medieval execution. And then, Battery. The speed was terrifying. But it was the title track, Master of Puppets, that changed everything. 8 minutes and 36 seconds. In 1986, a song that long was commercial suicide. But Metallica made you listen to every second of it. It wasn't a song about puppets, it was a song about control. It was about drugs, addiction, the things that pull your strings until your life burns faster. It was sophisticated, it was angry, and it was undeniable. Then there was Disposable Heroes, a brutal attack on the military-industrial complex. Back to the front, you will do what I say when I say. These weren't lyrics for teenagers who wanted to party. These were lyrics for a generation that was terrified of the Cold War. And then there was Orion, an 8-minute instrumental that stands as Cliff Burton's masterpiece. No screaming, no lyrics, just a bass guitar singing a melody that broke your heart. The tour that followed was a bloodbath, in the best way possible. They were invited to open for Ozzy Osbourne, the godfather of metal himself. It was supposed to be a huge honor, but it turned into a takeover. Every night, Metallica would go on stage at 7:30 p.m. while the arena was still filling up. The house lights were often still on. They didn't have pyrotechnics, they didn't have a light show, they just had the energy of 4 caged animals. By the time they finished playing Creeping Death, the crowd wasn't chanting for Ozzy anymore, they were chanting for Metallica. Ozzy himself admitted it later. He said going on stage after them was a nightmare because they had already stolen the audience's soul. They were conquering the world, one city at a time. They were untouchable. They were young, rich, and invincible. They had the critical acclaim, they had the blue army of denim-vested fans, and they had the momentum of a freight train. They headed to Europe in the fall of 1986 for the Damage Inc. tour. It was supposed to be their victory lap. But destiny has a cruel sense of humor. The higher you climb, the further you have to fall. And for Metallica, the fall happened on a lonely stretch of road in Sweden. September 27, 1986. The date that every metal fan knows by heart. The band was traveling overnight between Stockholm and Copenhagen. The tour bus was cramped, uncomfortable, and cold. To decide who got the best bunk in the back of the bus, Cliff Burton and guitarist Kirk Hammett drew cards. Cliff drew the ace of spades. He looked at Kirk and said, "I want your bunk." Kirk agreed. He moved to the front. Cliff moved to the back. It was a tiny, insignificant moment that shifted the timeline of music history. Just before dawn, the bus hit a patch of black ice near Ljungby. It skidded off the road and flipped onto its side. James, Lars, and Kirk scrambled out of the wreckage in their underwear, shivering in the freezing Scandinavian morning. They were bruised, battered, but alive. They did a head count. 1, 2, 3. Cliff was missing. They found him pinned underneath the bus. The vehicle had crushed the man who gave the band its soul. James Hetfield was running up and down the road in his socks, screaming for the driver, looking for the black ice, looking for a reason. But there was no reason, just silence. Cliff Burton was gone at 24 years old. The aftermath was ugly. The band didn't take time to grieve. They didn't go to therapy. They did what men in the 80s were taught to do. They shoved the pain down deep and turned it into anger. They hired a new bassist, Jason Newsted, and treated him like an enemy. They hazed him relentlessly, taking out their grief on the new guy because they couldn't process the loss of the old one. They went on to release And Justice for All, an album that is famous for having no bass guitar in the mix. A subconscious attempt to erase the instrument because the man who played it was gone. They eventually became the biggest band in the world with the Black Album, trading thrash speed for stadium grooves. They became billionaires. They played Antarctica. They survived Napster, rehab, and infighting. But Master of Puppets remains the frozen moment in time. It is the only time we got to hear the band fully matured, fully confident, and fully intact. It is the peak of the mountain before the avalanche. "40 years later, the silence is gone. The roar is back. In 2026, Metallica is still filling stadiums across Europe on the M72 World Tour. They are playing Master of Puppets every single night to kids who weren't even born when Cliff Burton died. And when that middle section of the song hits, the harmony part where the guitars sound like violins, you can feel the shift in the air. You look around the stadium and see 50,000 people singing a guitar riff. That is the legacy. It's not just an album about control or addiction, it's a monument to survival. It's a reminder that 4 kids in a garage can change the world without compromising a single note. So as we celebrate the 40th anniversary, play it loud, play it until the speakers crack. Because somewhere in the static, Cliff is still playing, and the master is still pulling the strings.